Good morning. My name is Jay Rosenthal, and I'm the Managing Director of Business of Cannabis. Welcome to the Cannabis Daily Show for Tuesday, April 26, 2022. Since 2017, Business of Cannabis has highlighted the companies, brands, people, and trends driving the cannabis industry. We'd love to hear from you in the comments, and always feel free to visit us at businessofcannabis.com, as well as through all of our social channels, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do subscribe. After the rundown of the key stories and insights we're following, we'll get to our BofC Live segment, where today we'll be joined by Shawn Pierce. He is the President of Strategic Events, Meetings, and Incentives at MCI Group, the team that produces the Lift&Co Expo. Tomorrow, join us for our retail series. We'll be focused on the tri-state as it relates to cannabis retail. That is New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. The event is free. It's online. It's presented by Leafly and Vitrina Group, so please register and tune in. Details below. Then in September, Business of Cannabis New York returns. Information on that is below, but you should absolutely plan on being in New York in September with us. Now, before we get into today's stories, Business of Cannabis is up for the best news source at the Cannabis Business Awards. Again, we won it in 2019. They've been on hiatus since then, but if you are so inclined, we would love your support. The link is below about how to vote, so please go there, vote for us for our best news source at the Cannabis Business Awards. Oh, we are Business of Cannabis, and we approve this message. For today's stories, Washington State calls for federal cannabis reform following robberies and deaths. DoorDash Canada to offer cannabis pickup with Superette. Canadian cannabis market fundamentals right now. New York to allow on-site cannabis use. And Isle of Man races ahead of the rest of UK with medical cannabis pilot. For our first story, a series of sometimes violent attacks on cannabis businesses in legal states has many demanding federal cannabis reform, which would allow non-cash transactions. This is in a story in the Arkansas Online. Here are some of the details. Last fall, there were dozens of robberies in the San Francisco Bay Area that some believe were coordinated. In Washington State, there have been a lot. There have been at least 80 cannabis business robberies. In Tacoma, a suspect shot and killed a cannabis store employee last month. In Covington, an employee shot and killed a suspect. Seattle police shot and killed a suspect post-robbery. In Everett, a suspect pistol whipped a cannabis employee. Quote, "It makes absolutely no sense that legal businesses are being forced to operate entirely in cash, and it's dangerous and sometimes even fatal for employees behind the register." This is from Washington Senator Patty Murray. Patty, please talk to your colleagues. For our second story, always looking for ways to distinguish it from its competitors, Ontario-based retailer Superette has partnered with DoorDash Technologies Canada to offer cannabis pickup to customers in Toronto. This in a press release. The new customer experience is fully compliant with an age-gated portal and IDs checked when products are picked up. From one of their co-founders, "We are super excited to be able to partner with DoorDash to continue to transform how consumers engage with cannabis. In true Superette fashion, every element of the experience has been carefully considered with the goal of making our retail experience digital on the DoorDash platform." That is from Drummond Monroe. They also join Uber Eats, who last year joined up with Tokyo Smoke in Toronto to actually offer a click and collect service through that app. For our third story, each week Business of Cannabis delivers a series of insights from our partners at Cannabis Benchmarks. In this week's report, Cannabis Benchmark reviews data released by StatsCan, which expands their understanding of the state of cannabis market fundamentals. The data set they focus on this week shows monthly dry cannabis unit production and sales data through September 2021. They discover the dynamics are changing rapidly with the latest installment of the data, which spans from April 2021 to September 2021. See what they found. Read the full briefing on businessofcannabis.com. For our fourth story, Chris Alexander of New York's Office of Cannabis Management says the organization plans to solicit applications for on-site cannabis consumption by, quote, early next year. This in a story in the New York Times. The details are still in the works, with plans to allow cannabis-infused foods and restaurants to consumption lounges and coffee shops. Sounds great. We're definitely considering how people have typically consumed and where people have typically consumed, he said. For our final story, the Isle of Man's Department of Health and Social Care is launching a medical cannabis pilot program which could create access for patients there. This in a story in Business Can. Here's some of the timeline. In January, the Isle of Man passed legislation allowing cultivation, distribution, and export of medical cannabis. In March, the DHHC began soliciting applications from pharmacies to dispense medical cannabis products. The pilot will run for 12 months at a minimum. Quote, is it anticipated that the contract award will be issued in May, with the pilot service operational in August? This, according to a spokesperson. Quote, the successful organization will be assessed on a quality criteria that insists upon the provider having a local dispensary outlet on the Isle of Man. Those are the stories we're watching today. Join 12,000 others and catch all these stories and more in your inbox every day at 7 a.m. with our Cannabis Daily newsletter. Coming up on our BofC Live conversation, we connect with Shawn Pierce. He is the President, Strategic Events, Meetings and Incentives at MCI Group, the folks that bring you the Lift&Co Expo here in Toronto and later in the year in Vancouver. We're catching up on the upcoming Lift&Co show that's running from May 12th through 15th, with the Expo floor open the 13th to the 15th, which will be back in Toronto, following up on their successful 2021 show in November in Toronto. This is Shawn Pierce. Shawn, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jay.
Well, having you here today, but you're going to be back in Toronto in mid-May. It seems like talking about mid-May should seem further off, probably to you too, but it's really only a couple of weeks, May 12th through 15th. Lift&Co Expo will be back in Toronto. You excited to come back in the spring as opposed to the near winter?
Yeah, we are. That was kind of interesting, Jay, to get the, COVID certainly threw the pattern off on all these live events and trying to get back on pattern. This is kind of what we had to do. Be back on pattern for Toronto and then get to where we have Vancouver coming up in the next year. So that's just so exciting for us to get back on a real pattern and things.
Well, it's exciting here too. And it's funny because so Lift in November, like anybody who had never been to Toronto or hadn't been to Toronto a long time, like cannabis has taken over town. Like there's so many retailers, certainly around the convention center, but any neighborhood in Toronto. And of course, in November, I think there were still restrictions on COVID restrictions, but now we're going into May. Like, what are you looking forward to? Because I know there's some new additions to the conference too. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, quite a bit. And thank you. It's going to be a great show coming up. We were able to get a few things done between November and now. The restrictions have been lifted, but certainly encourage everybody that wants to, continue to wear their masks, do that if they feel like that's best for them. But we're very happy about the restrictions being lifted there. So for us, we're really excited about this show coming. We got an investor component coming in to try to introduce that money level. So that there's a lot of investments still coming into the marketplace. When we give a chance for those folks to come together and see opportunities and companies that are looking for money and people are looking to give money out. So that investor conference can be a nice addition to it. Also, the party, the after party. Last year we had the great party at the El Macambo, which is awesome, but it's a little too small to have everybody. We had to be smaller during COVID, and now we're gonna be right there by the convention center and have everybody right there on Saturday night. Changing a little bit between having two, public days, if you would, or I like to call them enthusiast days. We're gonna have that as one enthusiast day and two bud tender industry days. So kind of flip that switch a little bit because we got a lot of feedback that they just need more time for the business side of life. And as you said, it's booming around there as far as the number of retailers and that sort of thing. So people are looking for new options, new business techniques, new products, new services. It's gonna be important.
It is important. And it's also interesting. And it's like, while November was great to see everybody, we went back into lockdown shortly thereafter, not because of Lyft, but because of COVID upticks. But now going into the spring, there's sort of a new level of optimism about where things are going, but also about the industry itself. And I want to know, obviously you travel a lot, you have other events that you do on the cannabis side. Like, are you sensing that excitement, not just in Toronto, obviously, but as you travel the US as well, where even more positivity is coming, right? There's new markets coming online. Like, are you sensing this sort of bigger lift across your events where there's just a great deal of excitement of what's happening, specifically maybe even in the US?
Yeah, so the excitement level is pretty darn high. I think that as you look at almost every industry that sort of evolves, it's a brand new industry 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? And you had this unbridled enthusiasm that was a little bit over enthusiastic in some places, and then you got a maturing going on, and then now you're kind of in that. I kind of know how to run a business now. Now I'm ready to expand. I'm ready to move on and think about having 2 shops or 3 shops or hiring in more bud tenders. So I have a certain technique or genre that makes me different than the next guy. So people are trying to really mature and think about how to make their businesses a heck of a lot better. And we see that enthusiasm across. We're seeing a lot of opportunities in the marketplace, especially around events, around this festivalization concept and things. I'm not positive how that's going to go yet, because we tend to stick a little bit closer to the business side with the fun versus the fun side with a little bit of business. So we kind of make sure that, at the end of the day, we all have to make a dollar to pay for our bills and things like that. But we want to have a darn good time doing it. So I do see a lot of festivals popping up around. We'll see how that goes. Or the restrictions are kind of weird around that. But I'm kind of interested to see how that rolls. It's going to be a nice new addition to our overall marketplace.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I would sort of I want to actually more even get nitty gritty and related to cannabis or not. From your perspective, someone who does a lot of major events right across North America, how is Canada or even Toronto specifically, like how does it stack up in terms, I don't even know how you measure, like in terms of hotel rooms, sort of the welcoming nature of the people in charge, like is it a good place to do conference business? Or are you going to give me a diplomatic answer? Those are the 2 options.
Well, there is a part of it that has to do a certain level of diplomacy here, Jay, but I appreciate the question. I'll tell you some things that I've always loved about going to Toronto. We have to use labor at the locality in every location, right? So temp labor for the service desk, registration people that are just there. I mean, it takes a lot of bodies to do an event. And the people in Toronto and in Canada are just, universally the nicest folks that you can work with. They show up every day when they say they're gonna be there tomorrow, they're there. Some places you got to hire 12 to get 10, hire 12 to get 7, but not in Toronto. And some of the people that are there will recall you each year and bring you a special baked item that they made. Man, it's just great. You show up and they got, the grandma's cookies and things like that. That's a unique attribute for Toronto and for Canada in general. We do the opposite side of things sometimes. I mean, it is difficult to get, it's just right there so close to such major metropolitan areas. But the reality is the restrictions at the border nowadays have made it a lot harder. Yeah. That's ridiculous. If you think, and we always draw that little 300-mile circle around the location and say, who's living inside that, how many businesses? And heck, you catch a great population down in all of Chicago and all that area kind of gets to where it's really doable, but man, it's just become so difficult right now at the border, not just through COVID, but prior to that with some government restrictions. I think that's stuff that we got to really figure out to make it to where commerce can move between the borders so much easier, more fluid. That would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then once we get it for regular commerce, we'll get it for cannabis commerce. Because even when right. Canadians, it's less so now, but there used to be this panic when you cross the border. I'm American, so it's a little bit easier, but like crossing the border to come into the States and working on cannabis was, you had to have a very good backstory, let's say, right. About why you were traveling, let's say to like Las Vegas or San Francisco or Miami on for a conference. One sort of story, someone would buy like concert tickets in the place they were going. So they actually had something physical unrelated to the conference. I'm going for this show. Yeah. Look, I have tickets. I don't know if that'll get you across now, but
I mean, I look like a Brooks and Dunn fan, but I am going to their concert.
Love Brooks and Dunn.
They're my favorite.
I don't know if they're playing San Francisco anytime soon, but certainly in Texas and Austin and Atlanta, where I used to live. So you're coming up. Obviously, there's starts on Thursday with you're gonna correct me when I'm wrong on all these things.
Sure.
Starts on Thursday with the Lift Cannabis Business Conference, extends into sort of Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. 2 days with industry days, 1 day with your not advocate days, but enthusiast days, and mixed in with the Canvas North investment series as well. Do I have it all right? Am I?
That is right. That is directionally correct. I mean, there's going to be a lot of master classes we're putting on the stages in the hall itself. They just come with the show. That's going to be a big deal this year. A lot of 420 receptions. We're throwing out there some fun activities. some bud tenders specifically attributed classes as well as business opportunities for them. We see that as an area that needs to get some, more training, more education on how they can take themselves from A to B, right? It's a good entry level into the deal, but how do I decide, am I going to be like this bud tender du jour, or am I going to be a business owner? Am I going to be, a manager over multiple bud tenders? Do I be a trainer? What are those rules? And think that we've got a role to play in making sure that can happen. And that's a big focus on this year's event, is try to really help the bud tenders to understand selection, product usages, both from a medical side as well as the more personal enjoyment side. So those are critical to us this year to get that out there. We're still going to do psychedelics this year. I mean, we had the full day of psychedelic conference last year. What we've done is we've taken and said, instead of just pushing them off in an area to focus on psychedelics, it's good topics. We're going to spread that conference pattern throughout, so they get conference psychedelics throughout the conference, and continue that conversation. We definitely know we're part of the leading edge of that conversation to get from medical research to actual implementation for patient care to the next steps. And it takes an evolution, and we want to be part of that evolution.
Well, I love it. I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks in Toronto. As this runs, we'll post how to get not in touch with you, but how to get people's tickets. And we will see folks in mid-May, which is only a couple weeks away, even though winter just ended here in Toronto. But Shawn, thanks for spending time. Safe travels. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you, bud. Take it easy. See you. Bye.
That was episode 70 of the Cannabis Daily Show. Thank you for joining us on YouTube or wherever you caught the program. Please do subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow.